This is a recording of Bessie Edith Morton Kincaid, made March the 8th, 1979. Let's start.
I was born in Nicholas County at Craigsville, and I think we moved from there when I was about 6 weeks old, because I know my mother made me a little cap out of a part of her wedding gown. And it was so tight. I only weighed about 3 pounds, and this cap was just about doll size. It was so small, and I'm almost sure they had wagons back then. I know they did. They didn't have cars; they had to have wagons. And we lived in Richwood till I was about 5, and then we moved with my grandparents and my uncle and his family to Greenbrier County. We all came together in covered wagons. There was about 3 or 4 families, and we camped out on Coal Knob Mountain. And then we moved up in Greenbrier and lived there till I married. And my husband, my father was killed when I was 8, and I lived with my grandparents until I married. And we lived in what they call Chestnut Flat up in Greenbrier County for several years, and then when I married, I moved to Pocahontas County, and we lived up there quite a while, and I had 1 child there, and we moved to Huntington, and I had a daughter, Evelyn, born in Huntington. And I forgot to tell you about my father. He was buried in Ripley in Jackson County, 40 miles from Charleston, and I think the cemetery, they called it the Old Oak Hill Cemetery. And his father was a minister, and I think there was an old church near the cemetery I think that was his church when he was a minister there. And when I got married, I lived in Huntington a while and moved to Beckley, West Virginia, which I've been living here for about 50 years, and I guess I'll live the rest of my life here. Now,
You get to the gate.
well, when we went to that cemetery, it was a good road up there, but we got into mud and got stuck up and had to be pulled out. But if you ever go to that cemetery, you go in. It's an old cemetery, but there's a lot of new stones, and it's a nice place up on the hill. And when you go in the little gate, you go right. You turn to your right and go right by the fence, and right in the corner, all of my grandparents and their people are buried. And my father's buried right by his mother and his father. And then there's some more Mortons nearby. I didn't recognize any of them. But I don't think you'd have any trouble finding it, because it seemed like everybody knew where the old Oak Hill Road was. So I guess that's about all.
How was he killed? How was he killed?
With the log train. Oh, how was he killed? Oh, well, he was working. They was getting logs out of the river. They had a dam, and they put I don't know how they done it, but anyway, he was loading logs onto a crane, I think they called it, and they had a log. They didn't fasten it correct or something, and about halfway up to the train, it fell and struck him and killed him. But he died suddenly. Never knew what killed him. They said he seen it coming, but he just like he was frozen, couldn't move. That's what.
Back to school.
School. Oh, my school. I went to school at Chestnut Flat. I started there when I was about 6 or 7. And it was a little one-room school. And all the students from about 1st grade up to about 8 went to this school. And after so many years, they tore the schoolhouse down. And when they took the weatherboarding off, it was an old log school. And it probably was 100-year-old or more. And we usually had about 30 to 35 students. And I walked a mile and a half to school on a dirt road, but I didn't go all the time. Sometimes when the snow got deep, we couldn't go. But that's where I went to school most all my school life. So,
What county was it?
huh?
What county?
Greenbrier. Perfect. What? Greenbrier.
What? Go ahead.
My mother was a Nettles before she married to Morton. And all the Nettleses that was out lived in Richwood moved to Greenbrier County and bought farms and raised their families in Greenbrier. But I think that my grandfather Nettles came from Monroe County. And my grandmother was a Bowyer, and she came from Summers County, near Creamery, wherever that is, I don't know. Not very far from Hinton. And my grandfather, when he was young, he was a railroader. And so was his brother. And I think one of my uncles was a railroader too. But after we moved to Greenbrier, they farmed I think they were, most of their lives, they lived on farms. So I think that's all I know.
Who was it?
My grandmother Nettles and grandfather Nettles is buried at Carl Hill Cemetery in Greenbrier County. And they have a daughter, Georgie Appletree, and her family's buried there. And my Uncle Verdi Nettles and his wife and one son is buried in Carl Hill Cemetery. That's about 7 miles from Lewisburg.
Your grandfather bought 7 plots.
What? Oh, he's ready? When my grandfather died, they bought 7 plots in Carl Hill Cemetery. And that's where they buried my grandfather and grandmother and my aunt and her little boy, Charles Jr., and her husband, Charlie Appletree. And he's been dead about 2 years. Everyone. And they had one son, my half-brother, Albert. He lives in New York now. I think that's all.